Hey, we are very excited to have another Instagram live chat with one of our team members, Charlie Cavanagh. We are very excited because she just came off of a recent amazing win that we will fully get into with her so she can share her actual experience with that. And I'll let her explain everything about herself, how she got into boxing, where she is now, and everything kind of in between. I don't want to miss anything or leave anything out, but we're excited to chat with her and hear more about her experiences. She's been to Worlds as a youth, now as an elite, so it'll be very interesting to hear the difference between the two experiences, as well as the caliber of boxing that she experienced at both times. She is here right now. I'm just going to let her request for her to join, and then we'll get started. Hey Charlie, how's it going?
Hey, I'm good. How are you?
Awesome. I'm very excited to have you here and just chat more about you, about your boxing, and kind of everything in between. So, as I kind of did a short intro earlier, I don't want to miss anything. So, can you, I guess, start with, how you got into boxing and what made you want to do it, and then we'll get into kind of where you are at now with everything.
Okay, sure. Yeah. So a lot of people don't know this, but I actually started out in judo, a martial art. My dad sort of enrolled my brother and I as a way to build discipline and just sort of insisted that we do it. And I wasn't all that fond of it, to be honest. I didn't love it. And I had a friend who was in boxing when I was in middle school, and she said, you should come try it. So I went and tried it, and I immediately fell in love with it. I loved the people at the club. I loved just the act of boxing. Like, I liked it a lot more than I liked judo. So my dad allowed me to switch over. He was like, well, boxing is still a combat sport. Like, I feel safe with that. So he let me make the switch. And pretty quickly, the coaches at the club said that I was advancing quite fast and that I should try sparring. And when I started, I had no intention of competing. I just wanted to come and try it out and maybe like get in shape. And like, I was only about 12 or 13 years old. And I actually used to shadow box in the changing room because I didn't want anyone to see me. I was like, I'm so bad at this. But I ended up picking it up quite quickly, and I did decide to spar, and that led into me fighting, and it just sort of took off from there.
Awesome. We actually just had, in a long time, one of the first all-female cards in Toronto last night, and so it was interesting talking to a bunch of the girls at our table, saying there were a bunch of girls that had their first fights, and it's always really exciting to see that. And so I asked all the girls at the table, I'm like, do you remember your first fight? And everyone, there were two out of the three that said 100%, and one was like 10 seconds. So speaking of, do you remember your first fight?
Yes, I absolutely remember my first fight. I remember it was supposed to be an exhibition with like a minute and 30-second rounds. The girl that I was competing against had already fought before, and I was super nervous. And my coach came up to me about a half an hour beforehand and was like, we're going to do 2-minute rounds and it's going to be a fight. You can do this. And I was like, what do you mean? So that was high pressure and like very like on the spot. But I think that's the sort of scenarios that I thrive in. Like, I like sort of expecting the unexpected, I guess.
I think that's almost better. Like, I know there's been a couple of situations where we've had some girls get a fight like last minute, in the sense that like there's like about 2 weeks out, and there's less pressure of that mental game going into it. So I don't hate that. I think maybe for your first fight, it could be a bit more daunting, but that's awesome. So when you first started at 12, did you imagine you would be where you are here now?
No, absolutely not. And even still, like sometimes I'll connect with my old judo coaches and they wanted me to go to nationals for judo. And I was like, no, not my thing. No, thank you. And now they say like, look at you, like you're here, like world champion and now world silver medalist. Like, did you even think you'd be here? I'm like, no, absolutely not. But it's just, I guess it's just the way it happened. It was meant to be.
Yeah, well, I guess as well too, you worked hard, and I think as boxers, we always kind of want to advance and do more and keep pushing ourselves past what we think we're capable of. And then once we get there, we're like, oh, I could do that. Now what's the next thing?
Oh, am I still there?
Yeah, you're good. And so,
yeah, so sorry.
No, go ahead. Go.
Yeah, so when I won the youth world championship, I was sort of in that position where I was like, I just had this great accomplishment and it's huge, but I'm only 18 years old and I don't want to peak at 18. Like, what's next? What else can I do? Like, what's the next best thing? What can I do to step up from here? So I definitely had those feelings.
Yeah. And how has it been being on Team Canada, but then also, you're in New Brunswick, so you're not with the team at all times. Is it difficult? Do you try and get to Quebec to train if you can? How does that work?
Yeah, so it's been a lot of back and forth right now. I'm actually headed off to Quebec for the beginning of July for a quick training camp. But I'm also going to be doing some apartment hunting. I am moving to Montreal because that sort of back and forth has proved to be a little bit unsustainable in terms of getting the best training and the best competition that I can get. And now where I'm not a student, I just recently graduated from UNB. I'm sort of more in a position to make that move. So I'm really happy about that.
That's awesome. I didn't know that. So that'll be nice to be a little bit closer and less travel time, which will be really nice. And you've been with the national team for how long? I guess as a youth and then now as a elite adult.
Yeah, so it's been off and on. So I made the national team for the first time in 2016. But at that point, I was still a junior. So I wasn't even technically national team. I was just national champion, I guess. But I've been competing with the national team since 2017. Obviously, there was a couple of years there, 2019 to 2021, where I wasn't competing with the team.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's been since 2016 that I've been with the team, and now going to be moving to train with the team full time is something that I'm really excited about.
That's amazing. And how has actually, no, I'll get to that separately. But in terms of, you've had a great coach with Joe in New Brunswick. And I guess, are you nervous to leave that close connection there and move to Montreal? Will you go back and still get some training when you can?
It's bittersweet, definitely, because Joe and I have such a unique connection. He's been in my corner since the day I started when I was 12 years old. And that's something that I think is hard to build, that personal connection with a coach like that. And something that I think will be definitely a challenge moving to Montreal with coaches that I don't necessarily have that same personal connection with. I'm hoping that those coaches will work with my personal coach a bit to sort of learn more about me and how I prefer to be coached and what works with me, because like every athlete's different, and boxing is so, like, it's such an individual sport that I think that's going to be necessary. It's going to be sad to leave. I love my club. I love my coach, and I definitely will be coming home for like holidays and stuff like that. And we'll be seeing my coach, because my coach's family is probably my second family. Like, I see them all the time. So it'll be sad. But I know they're supporting me 100% and just wanting me to see how far I can go with this.
Yeah, that's awesome. So your time at Worlds for the youth was, remind me again the year. If I'm being honest, years are all like a mystery for me. So when was that?
2018.
2018. And that was was that one of your first international experiences or no?
So I had a couple of years of international experience at that point. My first international fight was in I want to say late 2016 or early 2017.
Okay.
So I had a little bit of experience, but a fraction of the experience of the girls I was fighting. I think at that time, because I had been upgraded to fight at nationals when I only had 3 fights, so I only had about 25 fights when I went to Youth Worlds, and some of the girls I was fighting had upwards of 100. So there was definitely an experience gap.
And what, if you can remember, again, it was a time ago, and I think, I don't know, I feel like for me, if like 1 year passes, I forget it. But do you remember that experience? Do you remember like the flight? Do you remember the weigh-ins there? Do you remember that experience? And it's going to be similar to what you just experienced now, which I want to get into after, but do you remember that experience and then how it differed from this time?
Yeah, I certainly remember the experience like it was yesterday. It was like one of the best times of my life, so I remember it all quite vividly. I would say that a lot of it was the same. The biggest difference I noticed was at the Women's World Championship recently, it was all women, whereas at the Youth World Championship, it was girls and boys. So I had never seen so many female athletes as I had seen at the Women's World Championship just recently.
That must, like, even watching it was inspiring and amazing. Like, I was at home and I was like, this many girls all together, and the caliber that was there was awesome. Which, by the way, again, congratulations on silver. That was fantastic. I know everyone at home was cheering for you here. I know at your, probably your club, they probably threw a whole watch party as well. Do you think that your experience from the youth worlds helped you this time around?
Absolutely. I think any experience is helpful in the boxing ring, but especially coming off a Youth World Championship to go to the Elite Women's World Championship. I had experience at that high level. And with some of the more like social media parts of it, where like there's people interviewing you and there's people wanting to take your picture, and sometimes those things can get in your head as an athlete, and you want to portray yourself in the best way possible. But I sort of was there to just focus on competing, and I sort of let everything else fall into place, and it did. And I didn't get too hung up on that, where I know at the Youth Worlds, that was sort of more on my mind of like, oh, well, am I supposed to walk out like this, or am I supposed to do this? And it was sort of weighing on me, whereas now I felt a lot more comfortable and experienced.
That's awesome. And you also had a nice group. You had 3 other Team Canada female representatives joining you there, which was nice. You also had Miranda. So you had a nice group of women support locally. And then quick question, because I know some people had mentioned it. Were there a lot of other female coaches at Worlds this past year?
There were a lot of female coaches, but there was also, I would say, more male coaches, which was a little bit like surprising to me. I mean, not surprising, but maybe disheartening, because at the Women's World Championship, you'd hope that every country would be sending a female coach.
And did you do anything differently, whether it was youth or in Women's Worlds this time? Do you have anything that you do differently for a bigger event like this versus, let's say, a club show or a smaller tournament at home?
I haven't competed in a club show in a very long time. From what I remember, I would say that my preparation is pretty much the same. The biggest difference, obviously, is that you're fighting multiple times when you're in one of these bigger tournaments. So it's more so just like the rehab and recovery of your body that become even more important, because you might be fighting the next day and then again after that and again after that, and you just have to be ready for it, whereas a club show is sort of a one and done. And another difference is like the atmosphere of it all, because obviously when I'm at home at a club show, I have that support system, whereas for instance in the finals in Turkey, I had an entire audience booing me, which was something that I had never experienced before, and it made a difference. But yeah, there's a couple of differences like that.
So do you really hear, like, I guess if a full audience is booing, you would hear that. But do you really hear a lot of the audience when you're fighting?
I typically don't hear anyone except the person in my corner yelling. But I did hear in the finals, I heard the crowd, because when I walked out, the whole crowd booed me. And I was honestly like, it didn't upset me. I was in shock. I was like, whoa, this is the loudest crowd I've ever heard. And they're all booing me. And then they all cheered for my opponent. And I feel like I sort of internalized that. Like, I just used that energy as if it was for me. But I really do think that feeding off the crowd is something that I do and that most boxers do. But to answer your question, not really. When I'm like in a club card or most cards, do I hear the specifics of what the audience is saying.
Yeah, it was funny because last night the biggest line that you always hear is like, "Oh, she's tired." People like even whether it's usually from both sides, and I always love hearing that because I heard that when I was fighting, and that gave me more fuel than anything because I was like, "No, I'm not. I'm actually fine." But it's always really funny how that's a good tactic to use so that it like fuels their fire. And so I guess right now, do you have any fights upcoming, or are you just training at home right now and kind of getting ready for anything that's going to come up?
So after I got back, I took a week off because obviously 9 days is a lot. And then I sprained my ankle almost immediately afterwards. I went out for a run and sprained my ankle. So I hadn't been able to get back into the ring. I'm starting back tomorrow with like boxing training because I was just sort of wanting to strengthen my ankle before I got back in the ring. I don't have any fights upcoming that I know about. I'm hoping to get a fight or two. I haven't talked to my coach about this yet, but I'm hoping to get a fight or two with him before I leave for Montreal because I haven't fought with my coach Joe in my corner since 2019. So it's been a while, and I would love to have that this summer before I take off.
One last one. So I did see your sprained ankle. Is that one of your first injuries you've had in boxing?
I have sprained this ankle 5 times now. So it's the occurring one. Only once was it boxing related. Normally it's just running or walking or something silly. But once you sprain it once, it's never the same.
Now, between your first time and this time, I guess the first time, I imagine there was a mental block that you had to overcome with that because you obviously couldn't train, and that can be really hard on anyone. I guess now, do you have a different mentality around it? I guess you also know what to do, so that does help. But is there anything that you have changed with your mental state to kind of overcome that?
I definitely know more of what to do, like you said, because I've done it so many times. I do find that I get really upset when I'm injured because I never stop moving and I don't like to sit still. So it makes me upset when I can't keep up or do things. Luckily, this time was not a bad sprain. I was only on crutches for like 3 or 4 days, whereas past sprains, it's been like 2 weeks. So that definitely helped bring my mood up a bit because like obviously going into the first week of summer, you don't want to sprain your ankle and not be able to walk. It was sort of a bummer.
Yeah. Last question, just going back to the Worlds is, so I know you want to have a fight at home with your coach, which will be really nice because you're having your family there, your friends there, as well as Joe. I guess now that you've had so many fights away, is it like that first fight away, was it difficult because you didn't have the support physically there with you? I feel like now that you've had all this experience, especially this time at Worlds, other than the booing, which obviously is not great, I feel like you've built up that full, like that inner strength, and that I don't need anyone else around. You've had the support before, you'll get it when you come back home.
Yeah, so I knew that everyone in Canada and everyone in my hometown was cheering for me. I just couldn't hear it. And I find that I perform just fine without that. As long as I have someone in my corner yelling, like that's all I really need. That being said, it is really nice to perform in front of a local crowd because I do love like putting on a show. Like, as much as I love boxing for the sport of itself, I also love seeing people that I know and watching the hometown cheer for me. And like, that is really fun. And I think it'll be a great experience to have this summer. But going back to at Worlds, the first fight that I got in the ring was against Wales. And it was actually, aside from the finals, I would say she was my toughest opponent at the tournament. And I wouldn't say that not having that support was like an issue for me. Like I said, I feel I've competed a lot internationally, and a lot of the time it's been just with coaches that I'm not super familiar with, or like teammates that I'm not super familiar with. So I sort of have learned to be able to do it for myself. But that fight was a very tough opponent, and I kind of felt like that was the fight that counted. And then after that, I was going to be fine, because I feel like there's a lot of pressure riding on that first fight to be either you're out of the tournament right away, or you could get that momentum going to continue forward into your upcoming fights.
Was that your toughest fight, would you say, ever, or just of the tournament? Or you said other than the finals, of course?
Other than the finals, I would say just of the tournament. Like, I was sort of comparing the girls as I went throughout the tournament, and like, I had Wales and then Puerto Rico, which were two really tough, bigger girls. I would say they definitely cut down in weight. And then I had Cape Verde, who was quite tall and thin. And I would say that was a less physically demanding fight for me than the first two. Then I had Algeria, who was a top 8 finisher at the 2021 Olympics, which was incredible to fight and beat an Olympian. And then obviously the Turkish gold medalist from the last Olympics and 4-time world champion. It was just, who just was an incredible athlete as well. So yeah, I would say of those 5, Turkey was obviously the hardest, and then Wales was the second hardest.
What would you say was the hardest part about it? Like, was it just figuring out her game plan, or she just wasn't aligning with your game plan?
With Wales or with Turkey?
I guess with both.
Okay. With Wales, I feel like the hardest part of the fight was just the fact that it was my first fight and I didn't have that momentum yet, and I had to build the confidence. She also boxed a lot differently than what I had anticipated, based on, like, after I got the draw, I did a little bit of research. I looked into some of her fights, and she's definitely gotten a lot better since some of her recent videos that have been posted. She fought very straightforward, and she came forward hard. So after that fight, I was pretty banged up. I managed to get the win, but she didn't make it easy for sure. Which is great. You obviously don't go to a world championship for easy fights, but when you have to fight again the next day, it makes it quite physically demanding. And with Turkey, I would say the hardest part about Turkey wasn't even necessarily her boxing skill, but it was just the idea of who she was and her accomplishments and her fame and her country there supporting her. And as much as I tried to not let it get in my head, it was a lot to take on and a lot to deal with and process in the moment.
No, that makes sense. I think she has, that home ring advantage, which I think always works in their favor, or typically always works in their favor, which is something you can't change or do anything about. So you kind of worked with what you had, which was awesome. Yeah. I'm going to double check. I think there might have been a question that came in. If anyone does have any questions, obviously, please ask away. I guess my last question for you is, and I know you said you just finished school, but I'm so impressed with anyone that can juggle not only like a recreational sport, but what you're doing in the sense of it's recreational to a degree, but then you're also competing on a national level and an international level at these world championships. So how do you juggle both? And then, of course, having a social life.
Yeah, it's definitely not easy. And I will say, for anyone out there are sacrifices that have to be made. You can't have it all. I won't say I didn't have much of a social life, because I did have friends, but I didn't go out to parties in high school and university, and I didn't sort of have my evenings and weekends free. went to school full time, and I had homework, and I had to study, and I had exams. But then I was also training every morning at 6 a.m, and then every evening at like 7 or 8 at night. So it was not an easy thing to do, but I just knew that for me, everyone's path is different, and I would rather look back at my life in 10, 20 years from now and say, okay, well, maybe I didn't have the super fun social life that a lot of university students had, but I traveled the world and I competed for Team Canada and I went to world championships. And for me, those experiences are invaluable. Like they're just, they were more important to me.
I couldn't agree more with all of that. I'm always impressed. And so congrats on being able to juggle both, because I know it can be really difficult, especially when, for example, if you're going to be fighting, you have to get your runs in, you have to get your boxing in, but then you also have to probably study for an exam or a midterm or write something. So it's it can be a relaxation piece that's like your treat after you've done like a hard study session. But I know that I can imagine, because with boxing, you're so focused that you probably forget about if you have a ton of schoolwork that you have to get back to.
Yeah, it was definitely a good distraction. Like I would definitely do those things where I would go to the school for 5 or 6 hours, and then afterwards I would have training. And a lot of people might think, wow, like you must be exhausted. Why would you want to go train after that? But it was nice to like get your mind off of things, get the brain working. And I found for me, it actually helped me in school, because once I get moving and get the brain thinking again, I found that right before or right after some sort of workout was the best time for me to retain information. And yeah, in school, it was definitely not easy, but I had a very accommodating high school and university. Throughout my degree at UNB, there were plenty of times where nationals or a trip would fall when I was supposed to be writing exams. And you're not just allowed to take exams whenever you want, but the professors were very accommodating with knowing that I was on the national team and knowing that it was a valid excuse. And there was often times where I would write exams at alternate dates or remotely from wherever I was at. And yeah, we were able to make it work.
That's awesome. And then I guess moving forward and into the future, I guess now that you've had a lot of things checked off a bucket list that I guess you've never really created for yourself, is there another country or tournament or both that you want to compete in and fight in or at?
Well, I think the most obvious answer is the Olympics. I really thought that after 2020 didn't happen for me, that it wasn't going to happen. I was really down on myself for a while, and then the pandemic started, and then it just seemed like I was never going to get back in the ring. And then when I did, and I did it at the international stage and ended up going quite well, I got that confidence back up and that momentum moving forward. And now it just seems like things have come full circle and they've come at the right time. In 2020, I was still in school, and it just wouldn't have been the right time. But now I have that flexibility to pick up and move to a different province and train full time and really focus on becoming the best boxer that I can be in the next 2 years. So for me, my focus is doing as well, if not better, next year so that I can qualify for the 2024 Olympics.
Amazing. That's awesome. I was going to say, it's going to be a very different experience for you going from, boxing, not to say that it was a part-time thing, but it did have to take some section to your school, whereas now you're going to have all this time to really work on your craft.
Yeah, honestly, it feels a bit off-putting. I don't know what to do with a lot of my time because I've always been someone that's been so busy that every minute of my day is scheduled out. And then now to go to a point where I'm not working this summer, I'm not in school this summer, and I'm really just training and looking for a place to live which sometimes I wake up and I'm like, what am I even going to do today? And for someone like myself, I don't like that. So I will obviously have a lot more structure to my days once I get to Montreal, like training twice a day, the meal prepping, and like the sort of the lifestyle that I can't wait to have. That's like my dream, just to get, like, my job is essentially going to be to eat healthy foods and work out and box, which are all things that I love. But yeah, it'll definitely take some getting used to, and I'm hoping to maybe take a few courses on the side, maybe like something part-time, just because I love learning and I love school. So that's just something that would make me happy too.
What courses are you thinking about taking?
I was thinking about taking something in nutrition and dietetics, because obviously it would relate heavily back to my sports background and just something that would be interesting. I'd also like to take a French class because I'm moving to Montreal and I do not speak French.
I was going to say, but from New Brunswick, you could have learned it or grown up with it, because half of the province is French speaking, correct? Or
it's the second like of New Brunswick. I wouldn't say half of people speak French, but a lot of people do. And we did take it in school, but I was only in I was in French classes, but I wasn't in French immersion. So I had French class, but not all of my classes were in French.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Well, I want to say thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us, sharing your experiences, because there are some things that I knew, some things I didn't know. One thing I thought was really interesting, I quickly went to Boxing Ontario, or Boxing Canada, excuse me, I should say, and looked up your little bio. And there was something that I thought was really interesting, that it says that something that not a lot of people know is that you paint boxers. Is that correct?
Oh my goodness. Yeah. So that was a couple of years ago. Obviously my bio is a little bit
it is a little bit dated, because it does say that you're in high school. So it's a little dated in terms of that bio. But I read that quickly and I was like, that's really interesting. That's something I didn't know. And I just wanted to know if you still do that.
I haven't recently, but I have painted a lot of boxers. I was in an advanced art class in my high school, and we had to pick a portfolio. And we had to do like 10 or 11 pieces that were centered around one topic. So I chose boxing, and I did like Muhammad Ali, Jack Dempsey. Like I did like a huge portfolio of different boxers, and some of them are hanging at my boxing club. Some of them I've sold. But yeah, I love painting too. I'm kind of all over the place.
Amazing. That's awesome. Well, boxing is a creative art. It's just a sport. So it has that element as well too. So again, thank you so much. Super excited for you to be in Montreal, because that also means you're a little bit closer to us, which is nice. And we wish you all the best. If anyone wants to follow you, we're going to tag you in this so that they can see your journey to the Olympics, which is very exciting, as well as that moving to Montreal and that whole transition, because that's going to be very exciting. So we're pumped for you. And yeah, we're just going to watch your career continue to be on that rise and go in the direction that you didn't anticipate at 12, but here you are now.
Yeah, I'm loving every minute of it. Thank you so much. This has been great.
Good luck with the move. Good luck with finding everything, and we will speak to you soon.
Thank you so much. Have a good day.
Take care, Charlie. Bye.
See ya.